This is the beginning of what we believe is a very important, obviously bipartisan effort. There is a wide degree of agreement that we have to reduce the deficit over the long term. A deficit reduction commission has been appointed, and its report will be sent to the Congress by the commitment of the leaders. We agree, all of us, that it is important that we begin now to focus on a long-term reduction of the deficit. I don't mean that it would take a long time, but that we start fairly soon with a plan that will bring it down over the long term. We are here because we believe that one item has not gotten enough attention in that, and that's American military spending. Too often the debate is framed as, well, do we either raise taxes or cut Social Security and Medicare? Everything's got to be on the table, and we will differ among ourselves on how you deal with those. But we all, the four of us, strongly believe that unless there is a substantial reduction in American military expenditures over a 10-year period, close to, if not slightly over, $1 trillion over what's proposed, that is, at $100 billion a year, you simply cannot deal with deficit reduction in a way that is economically and socially responsible. If the military has continued to grow at this rate and be exempted from these kind of restrictions, then either you get a level of taxation that would be disastrous, or you get a level of reduction in many domestic programs that many of us would find unacceptable. We will disagree among ourselves of what else should be done. And I think one of the important things to understand about partisanship and bipartisanship is this. I think partisanship is a very valid place in a democracy. You fight for what you care about. Where partisanship becomes a problem is when legitimate disagreements spill over and prevent people from working together where they should agree. And this is an example of the latter. We are in particular, I was pleased to see, I think all of us were, Secretary Gates' comments about weapons. There needs to be more efficiency there. And efficiency ties in because if any government department is given an unlimited budget, it's easier to be inefficient than efficient. So you cannot impose efficiency if people think they've got a virtually unlimited budget. There are specific weapon systems that in some cases Congress has forced on an administration that didn't want, that are outdated, that no longer have an enemy, and no weapon system should exist without an enemy. Very important prerequisite for a weapon system. We don't always have them. But we particularly believe that the problem is in substantial part an overcommitment of America militarily. The notion that we are the superpower and it is therefore the responsibility of the American taxpayer to intervene everywhere, every time, every place that there is trouble. Yes, we believe in fighting terrorism. Yes, we believe in defending America's national interests. Yes, many of us believe there are particular allies that may need some help. But the notion that, for example, the American taxpayer has to subsidize the defense of Western Europe, and we're not sure what it is Western Europe is being defended against. If military force would stop an Icelandic volcano, maybe it would have a point. But it does not appear to be a human enemy. But we also have a very wealthy enterprise, and I will just close and turn it over to my colleagues in a minute. But in Sunday's New York Times, there was an article that said that Europe's going to have to cut back on its welfare benefits and its health benefits and the vacations, but it made it very clear that, here's the quote. It made it very clear that one of the reasons Europeans were able to enjoy greater benefits of that sort than Americans is that the American military budget allowed them to spend so little on the military that they had money left over for everything else. That is an announcement. It does say NATO, but NATO is, of course, about 90% America, in fact. So we think the time has come for America to stop subsidizing them. We have commissioned a report from a wide range of experts, people on the left, the Cato Institute on the more libertarian side, to demonstrate that this is not pie in the sky, to give a showing of how you could reduce the military budget by at least $100 billion a year. We will be releasing that soon. But at this point, we want to make clear there's a bipartisan commitment that we have got to scale back America's worldwide military commitments. There was recently a quote from the president who said, and General Petraeus and he seem to be saying similar things, with a worldwide superpower, conflicts will break out all over the world and we will be pulled into them. No, we don't get pulled into them, we jump. And there are occasionally times when we have to go to our own defense. And let me underline, this is not about Afghanistan. We have our own individual views. I think some of us were against the war in Iraq, some of us were for the war in Afghanistan. What we now think is different. We're not talking about cutting back on any existing commitment. Those will still be debated. We believe that a prudent refusal to rush into unnecessary commitments because of some amorphous concept about the need for us to be the worldwide superpower, even where there is no definable security interest, that's unsustainable. And once we accept that and scale our military commitments to what our genuine national needs are, we believe you can produce the savings we're talking about. And now let me introduce my colleague, Congressman Ron Paul.
I thank the chairman for the introduction, and I thank him also for inviting me to participate, because it's been one of my goals as long as I've been in politics is to work with coalitions, because I think ultimately that's the only way you'll ever get anything done. So I feel very pleased on this, and to me it's very important. And also, as the budgetary crisis worsens, we have to look at every area. And there are too many who take the budget and say, well, you can't deal with the military budget. But I do want to call your attention to a particular word that the chairman used in his introduction, and that is he frequently talked about the military spending. And in the release it mentions military, but a lot of times we hear only the comment of defense spending. And this is what happens is they'll put a bill up or a cut, and you want to cut something, and they say, oh, that's cutting defense. But really, not necessarily so. You may want to cut military expenditure. And if you think of the military expenditure possibly just subsidizing the military-industrial complex, that's quite a bit different. So that has been one of my goals, and I was glad to see Chairman Frank use the word military more often than he would use defense, because none of us up here want a weak defense. And even I, who believe in very limited government, believe that is a major responsibility of the government. Individuals and states don't provide national defense. So I'm a strong defender of defense, but too often I think these expenditures not only cost a lot of money, but don't enhance our defense and actually have consequences that are not helpful at all. I do think, though, that ultimately we're dealing with a technical aspect of cutting here and watching weapon system. But ultimately, I think that we will have to talk about policy as well, because the motivation too often is, why do we need these weapons? And how many weapons do we need? And it deals with, are we the world's policemen? Are we involved in nation building? And there's one political point here I would like to make, and that is, if you look at over many, many elections in the past, when one party takes over from the other party, generally the challenger talks about an overextended foreign policy, and the new party that comes in has a toned-down foreign policy. Whether it was the year 2000 or 2008, the challenger said, we shouldn't be so involved. We shouldn't be involved in nation building. We shouldn't be the policemen of the world, which tells me that the American people are going to support us in this effort, as long as we do the job in explaining that we want a strong national defense. What we don't want is waste in the military budget. And I yield back.
Thank you. Again, to be stressed, we are addressing the policy aspects as well as these others. And until you get the policy right, you'll be on the. It'll be a hard thing to do. Next, and we're very glad to have this be both bipartisan and to represent both houses. One of the senators, Senator Ron Wyden, has taken lead on this for us in the Senate.
It'd be cruel and unusual punishment to give you a filibuster, and I'm not going to do anything like that. I'm very glad to be part of this effort, because here's the bottom line to me. Americans across the political spectrum, the center, the right, and the left, are making it clear that if you're truly serious about cutting wasteful government spending, you cannot unilaterally exempt defense spending from scrutiny. You can't do it. You can't be truly serious about cutting wasteful spending if you just unilaterally exempt defense spending from scrutiny. And we're heading into the political season, of course. And any time an elected official or a candidate says that they want to be tough about weeding out waste in military spending, their political consultants are going to say, you shouldn't do it because you'll get attacked. Somebody will say you're soft on defense spending. And we don't think that kind of political dialogue is good for the country. In fact, quite the opposite. We think we've got to inject that kind of dialogue into tackling the budget. And all the political choices coming up are tough. There is not a one of them that is going to be a walk in the park. You see that in the debate that we're having right now in the Senate. We're trying to resolve in the House as well the question of tax extenders, supplemental budgets. We're out of easy choices now. It means you've got to be serious about saying that every single part of the budget, every nook and cranny of the federal budget has got to be part of this debate. So I'm glad to be the bicameral wing of this discussion. I believe we'll have other senators of both political parties interested as we get this off the ground. But I don't think that there is a tough issue today, whether it's tax reform, whether it's cutting the deficit, that we can come up with a solution to unless we have a bipartisan path out of it. And that's what I'm going to try and promote. I'm very glad to be with my longtime friend of decades. And defense spending can be wasteful too. That is what this is all about. Barney, thank you.
And I'm now very glad to introduce a man with whom I serve on the Family Search Committee, who's been one of the most independent thinkers in the House of Representatives, a quality which is sometimes admired more in the abstract than in the particular by people, and Walter Jones has stood up in the face of that.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'm honored and pleased to be with you, Senator Wyden, and my friend Ron Paul, and you, Mr. Chairman. This is, what we're asking is absolutely necessary. There is no secondary reason except we are seriously concerned about America's future. We are a debtor nation. We owe countries around the world, China, $800 billion. And I want to tell a quick story and I'll make a few more comments and I'll finish. 3 years ago, Gene Taylor and I, he's congressman from Mississippi, we went to Walter Reed, as many members of Congress go to Bethesda and Walter Reed. We go into this room, we were escorted by an Army captain. We go into this room, there's a young man sitting in a wheelchair. And we just learned that he had returned from the Landstuhl hospital in Germany, and he's paralyzed. He's been hit in the back of the neck by a sniper. And Gene and I are talking with him. Obviously, this young man's in shock. He'll never walk again. But the point of this story is this. As Gene and I got ready to leave, his mother came in. I never will forget, they're from Maine. The mother has a shocked look like, who are these two strangers? So we reintroduce ourselves. And we tell them who we are. And she stepped back and said, I have one question. Can you promise me that this government will take care of my son 20 years from now? And one of us said to the mother, this government should take care of your son 20 years from now. If I saw that mother today, I'd say, no, ma'am, I don't think we can. That's why what we're asking is critical to be part of this debate and discussion by the Debt Commission. This book, The $3 Trillion War, written by Joe Stiglitz, Nobel Prize winner in economics and a co-author, it tells you that in the next 20 years, a minimum of $2 to $3 trillion to take care of our wounded from Afghanistan and Iraq. So what we're asking is what former Commandant Jim Jones has asked, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld has asked. Look at these 652 bases outside of America and see what is in the best interest of our national security. Look at these bases that we don't need anymore and the billions of dollars that we can save. And then maybe, if we're smart as a nation, maybe we can say to this mother, yes, your government is going to take care of your paralyzed son. Thank you.
Well, now I guess we've given out the letter. We intend to solicit signatures from our colleagues on this to tell the Deficit Reduction Commission that unless there are substantial reductions in military spending based on efficiencies and also on a scaling back of the excessive commitments, as Ron Paul said, the policy. It all has to be done together. We will not be able to, we will not vote for a deficit reduction package. We'll take questions now.
Barney, one other point.
Yeah.
The Senate still hasn't done the budget. You've heard discussions with Ken Conrad. I'm on the Senate Budget Committee. I'm going to do my best to take these bipartisan ideas and make sure that when the Senate takes up the budget, we show once again that defense spending is also wasteful in a number of areas and can't be put off limits. So the Senate's still got the budget to go.
Because there are nations that I think face a hostile situation, Taiwan, South Korea, Israel, where I believe a case exists for us to be in a supportive mode. But there are conflicts that break out, internal conflicts in a particular country. There is rarely a role for America, but we play one. There is Western Europe. There are other parts of the world where it is the exception where there is a need for us to be engaged. And, you keep extra forces on hand. You have to have a great margin of safety in everything we do. I also believe that we continue to maintain a capacity to destroy the Soviet Union by 3 separate delivery means of thermonuclear weapons. Given what's happened there, I believe there's room for a reduction in that capacity. In that sense, I think the President is correct. But part of what I fear is that to get the START treaty ratified in the Senate, he's going to feel he has to then ramp up spending on more nuclear weapons than we already need. Are there questions? Yes.
The President's proposed freeze in discretionary spending, exempt military spending. I wonder if you could address that.
Yeah, I think it's a terrible idea. I think it's one of the reasons why, frankly, on the House side, we're having a harder time to get a budget. I was very pleased that Ron Paul made that distinction. What the President said was he would exempt national security spending. And we say, fine, exempt national security spending. Don't identify that with Pentagon spending. And that's the key. I think that was a terrible mistake by the President. I think he has made a very grave error. And remember, the military budget has gotten up over $500 billion, and then we pay for wars on top of it. We have this system with the military where they're kind of like lawyers. We have them on retainer. But if they ever have to go into war, then they get paid extra. And so the total cost now is $750 billion, and I think the President is terribly wrong in that judgment.
I think this is a fight against a double standard. Waste is waste, and that is true wherever it is found in the federal budget. And to say, all right, we're going to have a double standard and we're going to subject a whole bunch of these domestic, issues to very tough scrutiny, but we're not going to apply the same principles of fighting waste and inefficiency to the military budget is a double standard. And if you're serious about cutting the deficit,
it's hard to make people be more efficient, but one way to guarantee that you won't have efficiency is to take the limit off what they spend, because then they don't have any incentive to cooperate.
One thing I want to mention is the open-ended commitments that have been made not years ago, but decades ago, and that someday we'll have to deal with. Because if there is a treaty signed many, many years ago, it's actually is construed as a declaration of war. Whether it's with Korea or Taiwan or Europe or NATO or all these places, the commitment is that our troops are there and that we've already committed. I think it's constitutionally flawed, and I think it's morally wrong. Because what right does one generation have to commit 2 or 3 generations later, not only the cost in money, in taxes and debt, but also the commitment of those men and women who lose their lives. So I think that someday should be reassessed as well.
Just on that. NATO, I believe, was a great accomplishment of Harry Truman and a Republican Congress in a bipartisan way. But that was 60 years ago, 1949, 61 years ago. Europe then was devastated by World War II. Europe today, the collective Europe, is larger in population, wealthier in total amount than the United States. The notion is this says that Europeans have benefited from military spending protected by NATO, which is the U.S. in drag, and the American nuclear umbrella. A little French hat and a little British pair of pants. It's just inappropriate. Yes?
Yeah, you know, obviously you're in an election year and,
No, I haven't heard.
well,
Well, because you're not. Are you up? Are you up this year? I apologize.
you've made a distinction between military funding and security spending, but the guns and voter debate is one that's likely to fight hard in the election year. So how do you...
Well, we want to transform it. Look, if people think you are sending young men and women into battle and not fully supporting them, they get angry as they should be. The worst days for any of us, other than being yourself involved. I was at a funeral the other day in Fall River, Massachusetts, of a young man who was killed in Afghanistan, and I voted for that war. I voted against the Iraq War. Nothing worse, other than yourself being menaced. You're going to sit there and watch them bury a young man when you voted for that war. Sometimes it's necessary. So we're not talking about cutting back there. What we believe is, look, let me put it to you this way. If you ask the American people what's unpopular, foreign aid comes up very high, and they often greatly exaggerate what's technically called foreign aid numbers. The most unnecessary and expensive form of foreign aid in the American budget is the military umbrella extended over countries that don't need it because they can afford to defend themselves and don't have any real enemy. So what we are doing is, frankly, your question is exactly right. We're trying to redefine the issue and make it clear, and that's exactly why Ron Paul made that distinction and why we've said this, that a large part of the American military expenditure is for things unrelated to our national security, based on some broader geopolitical concept of what's our responsibility as a world power, and it in fact becomes a form of foreign assistance, not to poor countries, but to quite wealthy ones.
Just very quick. Let me just be repetitious for a moment. We are a debtor nation. If we can save a few billion here and a few billion there, maybe we can start not only taking care of our wounded, but maybe we can start rebuilding America. We are heading down, we're headed for a collapse. All this four men are saying to the Debt Commission, please look at these overseas bases. If we need them for the national security of America, keep them. If we don't need them, save the money and spend it here in this country. And that's all this letter is asking them to do. Look at this. Again, you can look at the left, you can look at the right. There have been many, many leaders of this nation that have said we need to look at these overseas bases and see what we need to keep and what we don't need to keep.
Let me tell you one thing about the politics of 2010. Political consultants all over the country, ma'am, are putting into the can right now commercials to basically make the case that so-and-so is soft on national security, soft on the troops. That's going on all over the country. The political consultant class is working on that today as we speak. And what we're in effect saying is we're going to fight back against that kind of politics. We're going to say, look, not all defense spending helps national security. Wasteful defense spending is waste, and everybody suffers. But there is no question in my mind, because I'm up for election this time, that political consultants all over the United States are putting into the can, to respond to your question about the politics of 2010, commercials, footage, and the like, to say so-and-so is weak on defense, isn't going to be there when the country's vital interests are on the line, and as Barney Frank has said, we're going to show otherwise.
And that's why I go to these 3 lines. And let me just make clear, this is not a quote from an op-ed article. This was not a polemical argument. This was in the midst of a news article. It was a non-controversial explanation of why our European allies have been able to afford so much more social spending. And it was simply, matter of fact, the Europeans have benefited from more military spending because they can hide behind us. And, that's the classic example of an older treaty, and we're talking, well, you got to keep NATO alive. It was a great thing, but it continues to exist largely, I think, for sort of a historical egg, and that's the key. And, we believe if you make that clear, we're not talking about cutting off anything that the kids need in Afghanistan as long as they're there. Many of us believe they shouldn't have been in Iraq in the first place, and I'd like to pull them out of Iraq now. because they're serving as the Federal Election Commission of Iraq with guns. They're arbitrating election disputes. But that's precisely what we want to do. Thank you. Oh, sorry, man.
Quickly, are there other examples that you think are ripe for cutting? You mentioned the overseas bases as an area.
Yeah, I mean,
you mentioned that.
Well, the nuclear submarines, the triad to destroy the Soviet Union, and then, frankly, manpower. Our military costs are expensive. We're finding out about what kind of a pay raise you give them. If we have young men and women, and middle-aged men and women defending this country, being disruptive to their families, I want to pay them well. But we don't need as many. You could reduce manpower if you reduce the commitments. These bases don't just have stick figures there. They have people there. I said to somebody, I was debating this with one of my colleagues on the Defense Appropriations Subcommittee. I said, what are we doing in Okinawa? Oh, well, we got to defend the base. Well, but that's the base. I mean, we have to defend ourselves because we're there. We weren't there, we wouldn't have to defend ourselves. It's a kind of a bootstrapping argument. So that's another example. You could reduce manpower costs, which are very expensive because, as Walter noted, even if you don't get injured, you're entitled to health care. You're entitled to pensions. We don't want to stiff anybody in that category. We just don't think we ought to have many more people in that situation than we need. Thank you all.
Barney, good work.
Thank you. You all got the